Of course, I can't go off the chessboard. I mean, I can try. Like, I'm falling. 18 queens. Could you imagine a chess game where both sides promoted every single pawn? There were 9 queens for each side, and it was 18 queens battling each other? Well, yes, you'd have to just imagine it because it's never happened in a real over-the-board serious chess game. Now, have 2 5-year-olds played each other and specially created a game where 18 queens were on the board? Yeah, probably. But the record in real chess, competitive tournaments where people were actually there to witness, is 6 queens, 3 for each side. But still, 6 queens is pretty cool, and in fact, it's happened twice. So continuing our record series, we have our first tie. We're going to see 2 really exciting examples of 6 queens dancing around the chessboard. Now, I know you only see 1 queen here, but both sides realize, hey, you know what? My king is pretty safe. The white king and the black king don't really have a lot of good checks that are going to happen to them. So, in this position, black said, I need to get moving and grooving with my pawn. And black just pushes the pawn down the chessboard. Now, white gives a little bit of an idea that he's going to take and start going after this king. But of course, black defends, not only to guard the king, but because if you're going to promote a lot of queens, you need to keep a lot of your pawns on the chessboard. So white says, okay, your h-pawn is pretty fast. It's coming down the board. I don't really have a lot of pieces in the neighborhood to stop it, so I'm going to push my own pawn. And black says, okay, I'll keep doing it. And white says, okay, I'll keep doing it. And they're not just ignoring each other's threats. They really don't have a great way of stopping the other person's pawns, so they've got to get their own pawns marching down the board. We got h2, we got b7, and we got h1 queen.
Hello.
We got b8 queen, and we already have 4 queens on the chessboard. I think I've had 4 queens on the chessboard exactly once in my life, but of course, we are not done. Now, as we continue on with this really fun game, I do want to give a shout out to the man who inspired much of my chess records series, Mr. Tim Krabbe. He is kind of like a chess statistician and historian, and he actually did a lot of the research, which I am relying on, because if I were to go through every single chess game ever played in human history to find 6 queens, well, yeah, I wouldn't be able to record very much. I just rely on his research. So thank you, Mr. Tim Krabbe. Now, black plays queen a1. That was actually an important move. Maybe you're thinking, hey, black should push a pawn down the board. But if black tries to keep on getting more pawns going, well, these 2 queens are doing really well. And you can actually play queen to h8 check, which not only skewers the black queen, but when the king moves, yeah, 2 queens are pretty strong. That would actually be checkmate, and our video would have to end, and there wouldn't be 6 queens. So black played a very clever way of stopping the most important check, the h8 square, and black played queen a1. Look at that. The queen goes all the way to the left and defends all the way back to the right. That is the most giant Allen Iverson crossover I will ever be able to show you, because, of course, I can't go off the chessboard. I mean, I can try, like, I'm falling. Okay, let's put the queen back because, again, we need every single queen. Okay, now this pawn is temporarily being attacked, so we had queen on b to e8. Yes, you have to distinguish which queen moved to e8. Queen on b to e8, guarding this pawn and double attacking this pawn. Now black plays queen to g7, really safeguarding the king and, of course, safeguarding the pawn. Now, I guess you could trade queens, but that's not going to set the record. Oh, no. We had queen on f to e7. And then black says, okay, my king is pretty safe. So here we go. Pawn to g5. Let's do it all over again. White plays pawn to a5. Black moves the knight back. That guards the king along the h-file. And of course, the knight provides more protection to this pawn. And of course, it gets out of the way of this pawn. So white moves the queen to c6. Basically, white is building a little bit of a blanket for his own king. Now, black moves the knight back, temporarily making the queen move. Look at this. The queens provide sideways shelter for the king. The king is about to move to b7, and instead of pawns guarding the king, we have a wall of queens guarding the king. That might make him the safest king in the history of chess. Now, black moves the pawn down the board to g4. White plays king to b7, and we're doing it all over again. We have the great pawn race 3.0 because black gets a 3rd queen, and immediately white also gets a 3rd queen. And here we have it, kids. The first verified example of 6 queens on the chessboard. Both sides are playing serious chess, not silly chess. Queen to b1 check. And I guess white could block, with one of the queens, but that would give black a chance to trade. So white blocks with the knight. The queens actually stay on the board for quite a long time. Now black plays the move knight f6. I wish I could give you a lot of reasons for these moves, but honestly, my brain just hurts thinking about 6 queens running around the board. White played pawn to e5, making the knight move. The knight moved to g4. And we had queen on a to e8 because this queen could have also gone to e8, so you do have to differentiate which queen. By the way, let's just pretend for a second that this queen was on this square, just for example, okay? And white's next move was queen on this square to d7. You would not be able to write queen on c to d7 because you've got two queens on the c. You also could not write queen on 6 to d7 because you'd have two queens on the 6th rank. You would literally have to write down queen on c6 to d7. You would have to say the exact name of the square of the queen moving to d7. So for all of you who like weird notation things, that's about as weird as it gets. 3 queens on the board. Got to be really careful explaining which queen. Of course, if you play the game online, ChessKid will do all the notation for you. Thank you, ChessKid. Okay, now we have queen on f to f5 because this queen was technically also able to move to f5. Queen on c to e7. Knight h6, going back to guard this pawn and also guard the king along the h file. King to c7. I don't have a lot of insight for why it was played. Queen on b to e4. Let's not trade queens. Knight to d5. Now the knight's actually about to hop into f6. That looks like a really juicy square. So in this position, Black decided to remove that pawn. There was actually more attackers than defenders. If you count up all the queens, let's just go back. Black has all 3 queens ending at that pawn. White only has 2 queens defending the pawn. So technically it was 3 versus 2. And then the queens start leaving the board incredibly quickly. And now we just get somewhat of a boring endgame. We can relax. We can breathe. Black has an extra pawn, but Black was probably so tired by analyzing all those queens that Black didn't even really try to win because the remaining moves were basically just Black checking the white king around the chessboard, and the pawn doesn't really get very far. The king is running, the king is running. Black does eventually get the pawn to f6, and then after check, the players were just so exhausted and they agreed to a draw in this position. Probably, if the queens trade, this knight will find a way to sacrifice for the pawn, and it will be a draw because Black, after having 3 queens, will end up with just a knight and will not have checkmating material. Are you tired? Yeah, you should be tired. This was really, really exhausting to go through, but we're not done because we have a tie. We have another example of 6 queens on the chessboard. Now, the game I just showed you was played between 2 chess masters. The game I'm about to show you, boom, was played between 2 international masters. So these are good players getting into these 6 queen positions. Okay, now look at the chessboard. Both sides have a queen, both sides have a rook, both sides have 6 pawns, but white plays a little bit of a tactic. If you're French, un petit combination. Sorry to all my French friends for my pronunciation. We have rook takes g7. And when the king takes, this rook is not being guarded. Loose pieces drop off, so white played queen check. And no matter what the king does, he's eventually going to get forked with the king and the rook. And actually, Black does something very smart. I think a lot of kids here would say, hey, if my king goes to g8, then the queen will come to e6 and fork the king and the rook. So no way am I going to go to g8. But actually, you should go to g8 because if you don't go there right away, you'll eventually end up there and a lot of your pawns will be missing. Don't believe me? Well, let me show you. The only other move here is king to h8, but then white would play queen takes pawn check. Okay, now if your king moves here, you're again saying, hey, the queen's going to give check and fork my king and my queen. So I'm going to go here. But then the queen will go to g6 check. You'll have to go here. Then the queen will take. And now, at long last, even though you've done everything in your power to avoid it, you've got to go to g8. But now you're missing a couple of pawns in the process. Now when the queen gives check, you have almost no kingside pawns. So it's actually better to just go there right away. I know it's super weird. And in this position, Black, being a very good player, did in fact just go there right away. Now if you're white, you've got to recover your rook, right? You sacrifice the rook. You got to get it back. So we had queen check. The king moved back to g7, and now, very, very nice move by white. If you take this rook, Black gets a free queen move, and Black will probably take this pawn with check. So white threw in an in-between move, queen check, forcing the king back to the 8th rank, and then taking. Whew! All of that work to win a pawn. Now, surprisingly, white is still not really winning, even though white won a pawn, because white's extra pawn is the g pawn. It's going to be really hard to get that pawn down the board. Also, the black queen is incredibly active. She's already aiming at 2 of your pawns. So white might be a little bit better on paper, but with perfect play, it should be a draw. However, you know what this video is about. We are a long way from home. Okay, you might want to go ahead and get a snack because we are not done by a long shot. We still need 4 more queens to appear on the board, and there aren't any passed pawns right now, so let's see how exactly this unfolded. We had king to e7, queen to f5, guarding this pawn, and of course, relinquishing this pawn. Now, black played queen takes b2, and I think you're starting to see a little bit of similarity with that last position. Black has these two pawns over here and a strong queen on the queen side. It looks like black's pawns are going to dominate the queen side. So white, of course, has to do something on the king side to be able to compete, and white immediately plays queen check to pick off this pawn. Okay, the king moves to e6, queen takes h6, and you're about to see the race. Now, this is a really nice idea by black. Black could take this pawn, but then the queen would have to move out of the way for the a pawn to advance. So black says, you know what? It's all about speed and not number of pawns. So black goes ahead and plays b4 to try to get this pawn to a3 and march down the board. That's even faster. And if white takes, then the black pawn is super speedy. So this is a very, very cool idea. It's not about number of pawns in queen and pawn endgames. It's about who's got the furthest advanced pawn. Hey, is that a callback to my queen endings video on ChessKid? Why, yes. Yes, it is. You're a very observant chess kid. Okay, now the queen goes to g6, helping this pawn get down the board. Black takes. White pushes. Black pushes. We've seen this race before. White pushes. Black gets the first second queen. Does that make sense? The second first queen? So usually we would say black has the advantage because black gets to make the first moves. The problem is, when white promotes to a queen, there is no great queen move for black, not with either queen, because the white king is so incredibly safe. Now, white decides in this position to play a little bit of a boo-boo. White actually should go ahead and queen. Nothing fancy at all. And the black king is so open that actually black is going to end up getting mated. Even though black gets the first queen move, black's king has got so much more air around him. These queens are going to be able to invade the black king, and with perfect play, are actually going to be able to organize a checkmate. Unfortunately for white, white played queen f5 check first, thinking that, hey, that's going to help me win this pawn. That's true, but it also allows the king to start running to all of this clear air and get closer to his own queens for defense. And that's actually what makes the game last so much longer and allows more queens to appear on the board. Now, do I think that white played this move just to get 6 queens on the board? Absolutely not. White became a very strong grandmaster and just wanted to win the game. But nonetheless, queen f5 was a mistake. The king runs. Now we have 4 queens on the board. The king runs some more just to get himself to safety. We had queen check, and you can see the king is running to this open air, and there's no more checkmate available. So we had queen check, the king moved to d3, and you're going to have to take my word for it. There's no mate because these queens are going to start coming back and safeguarding the black king. So white goes ahead and plays queen on f, takes f6, and now the g pawn is passed. In addition, of course, to this pawn, which has been waiting patiently, we're going to see our 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th pawn race of the video. I can't even count. Queen to d4, safeguarding the king. We had queen check, king moved to d2, queen h6 check, king hides on c2, queen c6 check, king hides on b1, and now comes the race. Pawn to g4. Now this queen's got to get out of the way because she's blocking the pawn. So the queen goes to b2. The king is incredibly safe now. I don't see any great checks for white. So we have to continue with the great pawn race. We really need Danya Naroditsky to make the call, but I'll do my best myself. g5, a3, g6, a2, g7, a1 queen, g8 queen. And now we'll go back to Fun Master Mike, but that little height element would have been great to hear Danya call. We have 6 queens on the chessboard, and white has 1 extra pawn. You might be surprised to hear this, but white actually ends up winning this game by simplifying. That's right. Even in a 6 queens position, the strong player playing white said, you know what? If I get all the queens off the board, the easiest endgame to win when you have an extra pawn is a king and pawn endgame. So let's see how white does it. White was not really thinking about checkmate here. White just wanted to get all of the ladies off the dance floor. White wants to make the music stop so the pawns can win. We had queen on a to a3. We had queen on g to g3. This is really hard to say. And now the queens start leaving the board. Black takes. White says, thank you very much. And then black plays queen c2. And white, of course, could just trade queens here, but he plays a real quick queen check. And when the queen blocks, then we had queen to d3 check. Queen takes. Queen takes. And now we've got only 1 set of queens remaining. It's actually a little bit tricky what ends up happening. The king moves to c1. White plays king f3 to improve his king. And then black plays queen d4. What? Black is doing our job for us? Black is trading queens when that's exactly what we want to do? But chess kids, you've probably heard the expression, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Yeah, in this position, don't fall into the trap. Don't just play queen takes, because if you do, Then when black takes, even though you have 2 pawns and black has 1, black is winning. This pawn is going to move down the board and promote with check. So if we have another great pawn race, we'd have e5, d3, e6, d2, e7. Oh no, d1, queen, check. And then the queen rushes back to d7, gobbles up your pawn, and there would be a massive tragedy. Also, if we go all the way back and we undo the pawn race, if you play king to e2 to stop the pawn, then black plays the very simple king to c2, and the pawn's going to go bing, bang, boom on the next 3 turns, and of course win the race. So, white said, I'm not falling into your trap. Yes, I want the queens off the board, but I don't want to do it in such a way that you get a passed pawn. So white avoids the trade and plays queen to e2. Then we had queen to d6, queen to c4 check, and now black can still make a fight of this if black moves the king somewhere along the b file, but black was probably exhausted after looking at all of those queens running around the board, and you're probably exhausted too. I'm exhausted, and black made a big boo-boo. Black played king to d2, and now you can probably see how white simplifies into a winning king and pawn endgame. White played queen to d5 check, and there you can see it is winner, winner, exhaustion dinner. Yeah. White wins the game because black has to trade, and then when white takes, white's pawn is super fast, and note that this pawn is not even a passed pawn, because even if it gets to e4, and then it gets to e3, this pawn is waiting for it, so white is very easily going to win this game by, you guessed it, getting another queen. That would actually be the 4th queen of the game. But black resigned because he saw his fate ahead of him. All right, there you go, chess kids. If you ever get 6 queens in a game, you're probably going to be so tired you're going to need a nap afterward. And remember, as always, if you get one of these records in chess, make sure you write to ChessKid because I'd love to see how you broke an international all-time record.